What's up, my Financial Fit fam? Adam here, and welcome back as always. Last week, we did a little introductory course into ETFs, exchange traded funds. They are a grouping of assets. They can be tens or hundreds of stocks, bonds, commodities, or other assets like real estate. The true value is by owning one ETF, you can own a small piece of a bunch of companies. Why buy Google, Amazon, Microsoft separately when you can find them pooled together in one ETF? ETFs are bought and sold on public markets just like any other stock on a traditional trading day, so it's Monday through Friday. ETFs allow you to diversify your investments, mitigate your risk, and if the company does pay a dividend, you also get dividend exposure. There are ETFs that follow specific indexes, sectors, commodities, and other assets. With over 7,000 ETFs, it can be difficult to figure out which one you want to own. Well, in today's video, we're going to go through a specific way on sorting through ETFs so that you can find the best investment ETF for you. So let's get going. Remember to like this video and subscribe to this channel for more information around investing in the traditional stock market and also Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. You can also find the link to last week's video in the suggestions above or in the description box below. Today, we're going to be using Zacks.com ETF screener to find the best investment for you. We're jumping in here to Zacks.com, and feel free to stop this video anytime to catch up. So the first thing you want to do is find the ETF screener. You can find that under Funds, but you can also find it under Screening. Once you click on the ETF screener, it'll bring you to this next page. Here it's going to lay out all the basic criteria in order for us to find the best ETF. Now we'll go over these bad boys one by one. So the first is going to be the ETF rank, and this is set by Zacks.com itself. It's a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being a strong buy, 5 being a strong sell, and it gives you their opinion on the ETF as a whole. That little pyramid next to the actual number system lets you know that this is a premium part of the Zacks.com. So you won't actually get their opinion or estimated rank unless you buy into their premium version. The next category is active versus passive. Now remember, ETFs can be actively managed, meaning someone's overseeing the fund and trading stocks in and out, while passive means that the fund is pretty much set. This usually also dictates the expense ratio. If it's actively managed, the expense ratio is traditionally higher. If it's passively managed, the expenses are actually going to be lower to hold this fund. Therefore, it is cheaper to own a passive ETF than it is an active ETF. However, just because it's passive does not mean it's the right fit for your portfolio. So for today's example, I'm going to look at passive funds only. So I'm going to switch the A to a P. And why passive? Because just like Costco, it keeps the cost low. The next criteria is going to be the asset type. This includes stocks, bonds, commodities, or any other series of assets. You can see all those assets in the drop down next to the add button. At this point, you can choose whether you want to take more risk and go with something that has to deal heavily in equities or something more conservative where you're mainly focusing on an ETF that has bonds in it. For today's purposes, I'm going to look specifically at equities, and I'm going to hit the add button. So as I fill these criteria, I want to hit that green add button next to it. This allows me to create a sorting criteria and find matches for the best ETFs. Next up is the investment strategy category. Now this allows you to sort these ETFs and make them sector specific. So to get a full list, you want to hit that drop down menu button and you'll scroll through. You see agriculture is the main culprit here at the top, but there are tons of sectors to choose from. Now, for the purpose of this video, I believe clean energy is the future of our country and the economy, so I'm going to choose a clean energy ETF. Now that that's been added, we can go on to the next category, which is our investment category criteria. Now, the investment strategy was more specific as far as the actual sector. In this case, it is a more broad look at a specific sector. So as you click on the drop down here, you're going to notice overall larger categories like agricultural ETF. So it's more broad of an investment strategy. You can even look at stuff that is geographically significant here. The next criteria up is forward yield. Now this deals with dividends. So if you're looking for ETFs that pay out a dividend and hold dividend companies, this is the criteria you want to use. To the left of the Ed button in that text box, you want to put the percentage yield you are looking for as a return from the ETF. 2% would be considered a rather moderate return. Next up is the expense ratio, and this is tied to the active or passive strategy of the ETF itself. The lower the expense ratio, the less it costs for you to actually hold the fund. Next up is the currency hedge filter. Now this is important if you're looking at ETFs that deal with international companies. For the most part, I look primarily at domestic-based companies, so I don't use this filter a ton. And lastly, you could look at the performance of an ETF either on a 1 day, 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, or a year-to-date scale. I don't use these filters a ton either because I'm going to look at the charts in order to identify trends in the market. Now, if you look at the top, you'll see that I have 5 matches based on the criteria I've set. I'm going to hit the run screen button on the right, and it's going to show me those 5 ETFs. I want to take a deeper look into each of them, so I'm going to start by clicking on the ticker symbol of the first one here, the Blue Horizons BNE ETF. This will bring me to a summary page where I can learn more about the company as far as its trading and its trends. What I find most valuable here is actually in the fund information on the tab in the left is the holdings of the actual fund. So here you'll see the top 10. If you expand this list, you can look at every company that this fund holds. And what you'll notice is there's over 100 in this individualized fund. You can look at the column weight percentage. So the companies that have the greatest impact on this fund's movement will be located towards the top. I also use Yahoo Finance for this type of information, but it only shows the top 10 holdings. Here, you can see every holding of the actual fund itself. Now we'll head back to the main page on the ETF screener, and this time in selected category, we'll go to the description. There's only real 2 differentiating categories in this space. The first of which is going to be the top one, that's sponsor. Now, if you go to the drop down, it shows you the investment company that holds that ETF fund. So if you're looking for something that's specifically Vanguard, you would want to use this type of filter. The other big one here is you can search by region. So if you're looking at specific areas of the world, Africa, Asia, South America, maybe a specific country, you would use this filter to help search an ETF that would meet that criteria. Everything else beyond that is a repeat of what we saw in the top criteria section. Next under selected category is going to be the portfolio composition. And there's 2 larger criteria here. The first is the market value. So if you're looking to invest specifically in companies that are the larger companies that are publicly traded, you can use this to filter out ETFs. And the last big bucket is going to be the large versus short at the bottom. This can be dangerous for a lot of investors because it allows you to use what they call leverage. When you believe that a certain sector is going to be the dominating force in a market and driving the economy upwards, you can use this long-short criteria to magnify or amplify your position behind that sector. When you hit the drop down here, you're going to see long and short positions that are 2 or 3 times multiples, meaning that the higher volatility could lead to better gains, but it could also lead to greater losses. I really don't recommend this, especially for just general portfolio composition. And lastly, in the selected category, you can go down to fundamentals. One of the key components here is beta. Now this represents how a fund is traded compared to the S&P 500. So it's like a correlating number. If it's 1.0, it correlates very highly to the S&P 500. On the opposite end of the spectrum, if it's 0, it's a non-correlated asset. Things like cryptocurrencies and real estate tend to be less correlated with funds that deal directly with equities and bonds. If you're looking for non-correlated assets to the traditional market, this would be the criteria you'd want to use. I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough on how to screen your own ETFs and a little background here on Zacks.com, their ETF screener. Remember that ultimately investing is your choice. And the more you know, the more comfortable you're going to feel about making those investments and hopefully the profits that come along with it. As always, save, invest, and grow. Ciao, ciao.